Reddit, what's your most embarrassing doctor's office story? I'll start. During a genital hernia check when I was 12, I ejaculated on my doctor's shoulder when my junk was being touched. While cauterizing the hole during my vasectomy, my skin smoked more than it should have, set off the fire alarm, and I ended up with numerous people of numerous career choices in the room with my exposed nutsack. When I was newly pregnant with my daughter, I was at my OB's office for a pelvic exam. After I stirrup up, my doc is knuckle deep in my vag and says, "Oh, you'll be fine if you have a big baby, there's plenty of room in here." I'm sure she meant that I have a wide pelvic arch and would have no trouble with a veal delivery, but what I heard was, "Oh, I see dozens of these every day, but you have a huge, gaping V." My dad was getting his prostate checked out by this pretty good looking female urologist. She had to insert a catheter since my dad was having trouble peeing. Anyway, she removes the catheter once they're done and my dad starts pissing all over the doctor's leg. She took it like a champ and told him, "If I don't get peed on at least once a day, my husband will suspect I'm ditching work to have an affair," or something like that. Mine's not so much embarrassing as it is awesome. I had the mumps during my first year of college, and along with that I got orchitis, swelling of the testicles caused by the mumps, in my left nut, which swelled up to the size of a potato. It was really painful and heavy, so I had to carry it everywhere for a while. So I went to the doctor's. He checked my mumps and then I told him there was another problem. I dropped trow, lay on the doctor bed thing and he came over to examine. He laughed when he seen it, cause it was freaking huge, and said, "What seems to be the problem?" Jokingly. It was at that moment that I pointed to my regular size bollock and said, "This one shrank." Cue 5-minute laughter fit from the doc. Hi, I've got a classic. So I had this rancid throat infection, as in the back of my throat looked like it had been the star of a bukkake. It was horrific. After a week of being miserable I went to the doctors to get it checked out. Now I have never had a hot doctor before, but the one I got was this lovely mid-late 30s blonde. Very lovely. It comes to the point where she has to take a swab of the back of my throat and she says, "I'm afraid this will make you gag." Now I remembered a thing my housemate has told me, that if you squeeze your left thumb in your left hand really tight it removes your gag reflex. So I proclaim this to her, and to her disbelief go on to prove it works. Lo and behold, I don't gag. She says, "Wow, where did you learn that?" To which I obviously say, "Oh, some guy showed me." She raised an eyebrow. I went bright red and that was it for talking. TLDR made a hot doctor think I'm a deep throating champion. I'm going to tell a friend's story, since I don't have any embarrassing stories of my own. Cough. About 10 years ago, I had a very promiscuous friend. He would sleep with anything warm, wet and willing, and half the time didn't use any protection. One day he started having a burning sensation when he peed, more than your average UT. He'd had sex with a new random a few days ago, so he went to the doctor's office to have some tests run. 2 days later the doc's office calls him and says that he needs to come in immediately. He rushes to the doc's office, gets sent to an exam room, and the doc comes in with a clipboard and a very concerned look on his face. "Well, about that burning sensation." My friend is nervous and says, "Yeah, doc, you work at a restaurant?" Friend, "Yep." "Doc, you drink a lot of soda?" Friend, "Yep." "Doc, something citrusy, like Sprite or Sunkist?" Friend, "Yep." "Doc, the burning sensation when you pee is excess carbonic acid in your system being eliminated. Cut out the soda and stick to water and you'll be fine in a couple of days." Friend, "Why do you have to call me down here to tell me that?" Doc, so you'd stop having unprotected sex." Massive hemorrhoids. Went into the doctor and he had to stuff my anus back into my anus. Had to lay on my side for 3 days. A friend of mine mistakenly called her gynecologist instead of her dentist to make an appointment, and started the call by admitting she was overdue for a cleaning. Was getting a physical a few years ago so I could play HS football. Usually the doctor feels around your abdomen and that's that. This time the doctor made me strip and made me cough. I hadn't fapped in a few days with the combination of a stranger's hand on my beans gave me a semi which I tried to cover, which led me to accidentally fart on him as I turned around. Doc looked at me and said, You can play and left. Getting my very first pelvic exam. First, the doctor was so nervous. She dropped the first speculum getting it out of the package. Hands shaking and everything. Okay, I'm on the table. Speculum inside me. Doctor and nurse hanging out around my lady bits. I'm trying to pretend that I'm not here when the doctor goes, "Are you on your period?" "No." "Why?" "Datu." In her nervousness, she'd been way too rough and made me bleed. "Thanks doc." Went to the doctor when I was about 8 months pregnant. At that point in my pregnancy I was very gassy, and if I tried to hold it in it would get painful after a while. While I was sitting in the doctor's office I felt like I had to fart. I held it in for a while thinking that if I did fart the doctor would be in at any moment. 15 minutes passed and nothing. So I decided to let it go. The tiniest little fart ever. But it stunk like something crawled up my ass and died. 30 seconds later the doctor walked in and asked me what that smell was. When I was 21, I noticed a lump in my right breast. Being a broke college student, I ignored it for a while and finally got it looked at while visiting home for winter break. I had never been to this doctor before, but she conducted what seemed like a normal examination, remarking that it was really unusual for someone my age to have a solid feeling lump. She apparently wanted some consensus before she sent me for more testing. So she called in another doctor. Fine. This guy says, "Hello, I'm Dr. So and so, and this is my resident, and these are my medical students." Great. So I got to spend the next few minutes, felt like an eternity, in a tiny examination room, laying on a table in only my underpants and socks, with 5 or 6, can't even remember now, other people, who all take turns palpating my breasts and going, hum, mortifying. TLDR. Everybody touched my boobs. A couple years back, I had to get a physical for work. Ended up seeing an incredibly hot young nurse practitioner. I was 19 at the time. She was probably 25ish. As I got time to turn my head and cough, so to speak, she sat down, face level with my waist, and I immediately knew that within seconds I was going to have a raging clue. So I'm standing there, hoping she'll hurry, already blushing furiously, and she takes this moment to look up, currently holding my balls, and commence the standard medical practitioner's small talk routine. "Are you in school? What for? You follow the fillies." By the time Dr. Kanda was finished, she looked back down to be greeted by a tremendous, throbbing erection. She laughed a little and said, "Oh look, he likes me," and then moved on with the physical. TLDR got physical from hot nurse practitioner. Popped a Titanic boner. Had said boner acknowledged and allowed myself to hope. For one moment I had been transported to porn dimension, where hot successful adult females are attracted to 19-year-old scumbags. This was not the case. Received blue balls of a lifetime. Edit. Trying to not look like a fool. Moaned in pleasure when the doctor, who was female, had her hand up my V. For a while when I would poop I would faint. When I told my doctor he responded, "Oh wow, that's really embarrassing, hold on, I have to tell Barry this." I go to the doctor with this cut on my vag. She's looking at it like, how did that happen? I couldn't think of a lie, so I just came out with it. "My boyfriend tried to fist me." I'm like, "This," and she's like, "This." I was 12 or so, and my doctor knew I didn't like needles, still don't, but oh well. So he put a shot that I had to get in his pocket with his pens, so I didn't notice. In the middle of a sentence he pulls it out and comes at me, and I punched him directly in the face and broke his glasses. It wasn't intentional, per se. Dude was coming at me with a sharp object. It was instinct. He ended up grabbing me by the shoulders, pinning me down, and doing the injection. For years afterwards I couldn't face him. TLDR punched my doctor in the face. When my wife was in the final stages of labor, it seemed to be taking forever. I slipped out of the birthing suite to get some fresh air and make a couple of phone calls. They made me turn my cell off inside. A nurse came running out and said to me, "Quick, come back. It's all happening." And they rushed me into a room where I was confronted with a huge hairy pussy from which a beautiful bushy, dark-haired Mexican baby literally fired out of the birth canal like a rocket. I am going WTF when the doctor hands me scissors to cut the umbilical cord. Well, that was fun, I thought, as I discreetly slipped out and into the next room, where my wife was still hours away from producing. This one time I was pooping some blood, so I went to a clinic. The 80-year-old, hunched over, male German doctor had to have a feel around in my business. I'm a girl, FWIW. While this frighteningly decrepit gent was up to his knuckles in my ass, he loudly started asking me about analytics. I was shy and 17 at the time. I said, no I do not have analytics, and laughed nervously. He told me that he couldn't find anything wrong, gave me something for the pain, etc. While I was walking out through the clinic, asked all the other patients who were waiting their turn. He loudly said, you shouldn't laugh about analytics that way. Many young women find they enjoy it. When you try it, though, be safe and use lots of lubricant. Oh acute, acute, oh acute, acute. I skedaddled my bloody ass out of there right quick. Not me, but when I was in the waiting room of the hospital for a broken toe, I saw a somewhat elderly man, 50s 60s, come up to the nurse's desk and cough quietly. She waved him off as a sign to tell him to wait a minute, and he started to pace nervously. He was able to catch a male nurse walking by and tried to discreetly tell him he needed immediate medical attention. I was wondering why the guy was so antsy, and that's when I noticed it. The guy had a mixture of brown and red fluid leak down the back of his thigh from his shorts. The male nurse asked him to speak up, and even though he was quiet, I heard him mutter, I've got a dildo so far up my ass that I can't reach it, and I don't want the entire damn hospital to know about it. The male nurse seemed to hesitate a bit and motioned him to wait in an isolated room. TLDR. Older gentleman had a dildo shoved too far up his ass and started leaking on the floor. Recent story. When I was brought up from being under anesthesia after getting my wisdom teeth out, and before my transportation back home arrived, I recovered enough to unplug my IV and various sensor doodads and wandered into the waiting area asking for a blowjob. The nurse promptly gathered me back into my room, and I recall complaining that someone might have said yes and I deserve the right to know. I was having a lump on my balls checked. I described said lump to the doctor and he went about trying to locate it himself. I was lying down at this stage staring at the ceiling. After about a minute of him fumbling, he admitted defeat and asked me to find it. So I sat up and started to jumble them around in my hands. I was hunched over and he wasn't more than a foot away staring intently at my balls when suddenly a gust of wind blew the door wide open. Just then a nurse walked past the door. That was awkward eye contact. I had to go to a specialist urologist due to pain in my ding dong. My wife, who is awesome, accompanied me for support. The doc was at a teaching hospital, so he asked if a couple of med students could observe the exam. I say okay, my dignity was already at a new low anyway, so why not? I drop tro and the doc starts yanking and pulling on mini-me. He takes some notes and then directs the two med students to cop a feel right where he did. I happen to look over at my wife, who is trying to stifle a smile while watching three dudes essentially whack me off. TL. Doctor, my insurance paid for the most awkward handjob in the history of time, while my wife watched. A couple years ago I started having terrible hemorrhoids, which at one point turned into a massive infection as well as perirectal cellulitis inflammation. There was a bunch of pus next to my anus and I went to Kaiser to get it expelled. They laid me hands and knees on the operating table and kept me awake while they numbed me and cut me open. About halfway through I hear a squirting sound and the doctor moaned. A mixture of blood, pus, and poop was hit at the wrong angle by the scalpel and launched itself out like a fountain onto the doctor's face. It only hit her jaw and cheek areas, as well as her neck, but it was really dramatic and I didn't know how to react. It was already awkward enough. Now I had to say sorry for hitting on my awesome surgeon. One of the crappiest moments of my life by far. Wasn't embarrassing for me, but more awkward hilarious. I was sitting in the waiting room of my OBGYN, girl parts doctor, with about 20 other patients waiting to be seen. It's dead quiet in there except for one girl is on her phone, probably in her late 20s, talking to I can only assume is a close friend. Her one-sided conversation went like this. I'm at the vag doctor right now. Yes. She called it that. Getting my it checked out. Pause. I don't know what the hell's wrong. Dat it is ripe. Smells like mama stuffed a catfish down there. Pause. Yeah. There be rainbows left in my panties. For reals. Green, blue, and red. After and another brief pause of him. Shiite. I can't talk about him right now. Girl, I be in a waiting room full of people. She was white as white can be, and totally made me gag on her crassness and stupidity. I like my doctor. He's a young guy, always eager to please, but he's not used to an odd sense of humor, and he makes the perfect mark. Me, regular checkup years ago, yeah, so they stopped making Seldane. Doc, well, we're prescribing Allegra now, so I'll put you on that. Me, excellent. Doc, anything else? Me, nope, that's it. Doc, well, you look great. Good cholesterol, good blood sugar, keep it up. Me, thank goodness. I told my wife that all that blood in my pee wasn't anything to worry about. Doc, wait, what? Me, higher points. Doc, oh my god. Don't do that. Laughs, another time. Doc, your blood pressure is a little high. Me, must be all that marijuana I smoke. Doc, no, often that will lower. Oh, I get it. Wait, it says here you don't smoke. Me, no, but thank god my blood does. Doc, you're kidding, right? Me, completely. I am doing this next time. Me, I think I ate something that disagrees with me. Me, ventriloquist voice in my stomach. No you didn't. Me, see. On New Year's Eve 2001 I woke up with an unbearable pain in my left side of my abdomen. I couldn't move for over an hour. I was at home from my sophomore year of college but none of my family was home. After about 3 hours of crying and doubled over in pain in bed I crawled across the house and called my mom at work. She took me to the ER where they did various pressure tests and listening and decided it wasn't my appendix so they did some x-rays. The only other person in the ER was an old lady that had a cut on her head and she was trying to comfort me while my face was red and I was holding back tears. The doctor came in and looked at the lady and looked at me and whispered, I don't know how to tell you this, but your colon is full of it, actual term. I screamed, that's it, get it out of me, and he told me he could give me an enema, a suppository or a salty drink. I took the drink and chat for 8 hours straight. I was good enough to go to a party that night but still had the it and didn't get drunk. Felt so much better. TL. Doctor thought my appendix was rupturing. Doctor told me I was full of it. I'm a surgeon and I once removed a guy's prostate when I was supposed to give him an appendectomy. I love how he invites us all to go pooping on our doctor's floors. TL. Doctor pooped on the floor of my doctor's office. Now it's your turn. Not my story but a friend in med school. He was working in the clinic one day and went in to see a patient who needed a breast exam. Keep in mind it was a mid-aged but attractive patient. While performing the exam, there was a nurse chaperone. He said yes, very excellent data I mean normal, very normal. He was beet red the rest of the day. Edit, changed beat to beat. Alas he was not hit but very embarrassed. I had to get a colposcopy, where they stick a camera up your vag, with the male gyno, his nurse, and an intern. It hurt like a itch when they did the swab and the biopsy, ripped a chunk out of me. I was so mortified afterwards that when he was done his little talk in the end about cancer and cells and scary it like that, I said, thanks for sticking things in my V, and burst into tears. TL. Doctor I'm a wussy. I recently had a sore throat, and when trying to get a good look at it in the mirror, I noticed these large, pink spots, all over the very back of my tongue. I spent a week fretting over it, wondering what they were and why they weren't going away, until my mom got worried enough about them that she went with me to my doctor. Upon examining my throat and tongue, he pronounced that what I was seeing were my taste buds. I have never seen my doctor, who is an incredibly stoic man, smile so wide before. My family is never going to let me live it down. I had a pay the bills job as an administrator at a private hospital. We had an urgent referral come in for a testicular ultrasound, And the guy whose testicles needed to be checked was quite a famous actor and was performing in a play in town, so the schedule for booking him in was really tough going. So I was skipping through the next 2-3 days of appointment calendars looking for a free 10-minute slot, or a before lunch slot that was filled but likely to run short so there'd be time to speed him in and out. He was on the phone while I was trying to book him in. And I got so self-conscious at the long silence after explaining the normal waiting times and what I was doing that I said, all cheery like, "Don't worry, we'll squeeze your balls in here somewhere." I made sure not to be near the reception desk when he came in. Had nasal polyps removed. When there are a ton. After the procedure there are several follow-ups to get minor stragglers but mostly also to remove giant blood clots that have formed. My otolaryngologist is busy digging and scraping and scooping, and some monster ducking aliens are being dragged out. I can see my nostrils expanding like I'm passing a chicken egg size baby out of them. Then they shloop shut again. Anyway, he's grinding and yanking at this one and it won't come loose. He rotates it a bit, gently places it in a tray, and says nothing but leaves the room with a half smile. 3 minutes later he comes back and tells us he had a silent freak out and had to wash up because a giant bloody string of snot carried elasticity from the pool and slapped up against the length of his cheek like a cheap 25-cent toy from the bins at the front of a Kmart. Edit. Said polyps again in first line instead of follow-ups. Maybe my subconscious mind has an accent and believe it to be a homophone? When I was in college I went to the on-campus doctor's office to get a physical. Apparently the one in my records was outdated. I had no idea what I was walking into. And it didn't even cross my mind that it was going to be a full pants down examination. To make a long story short, the doctor was a beautiful 28-year-old blonde who was just out of med school or something. After she performed all the different checks-ups a male nurse entered the room and she commented that he needed to be there for liability purposes. I was confused for a brief second until I was told to drop my pants. She was on her little wheelie stool thing with her beautiful face eye level and inches away from my junk. I closed my eyes while she touched my balls and shaft, trying my best to imagine she was a wrinkly old dude so I wouldn't embarrass myself. Unluckily for me, she grabbed the base of my shaft for some test and I let out a loud, very audible, moan. I went red and she acknowledged my moan by giggling. It's okay. Nothing surprises me anymore. I just stood there, shaking my head no in silence, red-faced, and accepting my shame. TLDR, went to get a physical, ended up experiencing firsthand the closest thing to the start of a cheesy porno.